All right, we're going to go ahead and get started, and we'll let some others trickle in as the time comes. But welcome to our first spring installment of our Alumni Speaker Series virtual Q&A. Today, we are very excited to welcome our guest, Karla Jennings. She's going to be answering your questions today regarding taking your public speaking and presentation skills to the next level. Thank you to those of you that submitted some amazing questions ahead of time. We're really looking forward to getting to those today. So Karla Jennings graduated from FSU in 1990 with a degree in communication and a minor in music. She spent the next 4 years at her dream job working for the Jacksonville Symphony Orchestra. She then entered enemy Gator territory. Don't worry, we have forgiven her. But she earned her master's degree in communication from the University of Florida. And 2 more marketing and PR jobs in the private and public sector followed. And she has now spent 15 years teaching public speaking and communication at the College of Coastal Georgia and Georgia Southern University. She is a speaker coach for Tedx Savannah, and she was the opening speaker for their 2018 event with her TED Talk, Designing a Response to the Fear of Public Speaking. And if you have not watched that, I would suggest YouTubing after this and watching it. Our student moderator for today is Delaney Williams. Delaney is a sophomore from Lake City, Florida, double majoring in political science and humanities. Delaney is interested in history, political behavior, and anthropology. So before we get started, I want to remind the participants that if you have any questions throughout the session, please feel free to put them in the chat. They'll go directly to us as the hosts and the presenters, and we'll make sure we try to get to them. So welcome, Karla. I'm going to hand it over to you. I'm going to let you introduce yourself some more and give some opening remarks.
Hey, everybody. So great to have you in this session today. We've been planning this for a really long time. It was supposed to happen in fall semester, and here we are at the beginning of spring semester. I was so impressed by your questions. I'm so excited to sort of be kind of virtually back on campus today. 1990 was a long time ago. I feel ancient compared to you all, but I teach at Georgia Southern University Armstrong campus, which is in Savannah. And so that kind of keeps me in touch with what you all are thinking about and what you are experiencing as young adults getting ready to, I don't know, get launched in this world of work as you complete your studies. Anyway, I was telling Delaney before we started, I lived in Landis Hall on the top floor. The first year they offered honors housing. So that's how long ago it was that I was at Florida State before the whole dorm became the honors dorm. Lived on the 5th floor my freshman year, lived on the 4th floor as a good neighbor my sophomore year, and those were great days. I remember them very fondly. To the topic, or what I'm going to be talking about today, how to take your public speaking to the next level, I realized that you all have a range of experiences. Some of you took public speaking in high school, maybe some of you were in debate in high school. Maybe public speaking is not something that you particularly worry about too often, except for when you have a presentation coming up in a class or something like that, or have to lead a meeting for your student organization. So some of you are probably on that end of the spectrum, and you're just here going, yeah, I want to know how I can do this better. And then there's some of you who you passed on the chance to take a public speaking class already, or you see it coming up and you're like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do about that? And so I recognize that there are both types of people and everywhere in between in here today, but we're going to take the questions that you asked and we're going to go through them. And to get us started, what I'd like to do is just go quickly through something that I've prepared that will probably answer most of those questions. So here we go, just a very quick, just a few slides, taking your presentation and public speaking skills to the next level. There are 2 things I feel like are really important whenever you get in front of an audience. And the first one is asking yourself the question, what do I know about the audience? Because you want everything that you say to be geared toward or to be tailored to the particular audience that you're speaking to. So I found a picture of my new friend. I only met her a few years ago. And this is Sharon Delaney McLeod, and she is a broadcaster in North Carolina. And I had the pleasure of meeting her and found out at a conference that I was at, found out that we were both from the same city, which is Miami, and we were both at FSU at the same time. And we both had a similar major. And so that was really exciting. And she, I think just last year, last 2020, not last year, the year before, was presenting at the Women in Leadership Conference on the FSU campus. And so there she is. Anyway, so, women in leadership, that's easy to know about your audience. You're going to be speaking to women. And so what makes women different than men? And then speaking to leaders. So again, anything that you can know about the audience, demographics, psychographics. If you know people in the audience, what do you know about those people? If they're a group of strangers, what do you know about that group? Why have they asked you to speak there? So that's really important. And that's, I feel like, a really good place to start is, what do you know about your audience? And if you're speaking to classmates, all right, there you go. You probably know, if it's for a class presentation, you probably know more than you think you do about your classmates, even if you don't know all of their names. And then also, what do you know about the occasion? All right, so here we have just a stock photo from Zoom about the occasion, but it brings up something that's very important these days, which is, are you going to be presenting in person, or are you going to be presenting virtually? And so that is important, because there are different dynamics that go on in person than virtually. And I'm not really saying one is better than the other, because virtually allows me to be in Tallahassee today when there was no way I could have stopped what I'm doing here in Savannah and traveled to Tallahassee for 1 hour and then come all the way back. So, there's some really great things about virtual presentations, but we also know that we're feeling this Zoom fatigue, right? This thing that we're just so tired of staring at screens, and me looking out at my audience today and seeing little black boxes, because most of you don't have your video on, which is fine. I'm fine with that. But it makes for a different dynamic. And so what do you know about the occasion? Particularly, how long are you expected to speak? Today, we're going to be together for about an hour. If we get to 2:55 and I'm still talking and I'm still going, you guys are logging off, right? So being very careful not to go past the time you've been asked to speak. Knowing the expectations for the presentation. If you're speaking to a student group, what are they expecting you to talk about? And again, in terms of knowing their audience, what do they already know about your topic? And then chances are the reason you've been asked to speak is because you are the expert in whatever it is that you're speaking about. And so adapting to the audience and the occasion are the two best things that you can do to be prepared. And you want to avoid this, okay? When you finish the school presentation and it was terrible, okay, so maybe you've had a terrible experience in your past. I so hope you haven't, but if you have, you can move past it. So to avoid that terrible experience, you want to practice in a setting that is like the one where you will be speaking. So I found pictures of two people who were significant in my days at FSU. Bernie Sliger, he was our President Sliger. He is speaking here. I think he's probably sitting down. I don't know where this picture was taken, but he's sitting down to speak, which is what I'm doing right now. But before this started, I prepared to speak to you sitting down. So that means I removed some of the clutter from behind me. My camera is in a good place. My lighting's good. So there were some things that I did very specifically because I knew I was speaking to you in this virtual format. Then we have Bobby Bowden, very significant during my college days. He was the coach for the Seminoles for a really long time. Here he's speaking, and he's at a podium, and there's a light that's going to help him see his notes on that podium. There's also a microphone. And so are you going to be speaking with a microphone? And we use microphones virtually now, but what is the setting where you're going to be speaking in, and how can you duplicate that as you practice? I tell my students, practice at least 3 times, or have 3 sets of practices. In the first practice, and you're always going to practice out loud. The first practice, you're going to practice for your content and timing yourself. Do you have everything in there that you need to have in there? Have you hit the time mark that you're trying to go between? Is it too short? Where do you need to add things in? Is it too long? Where do you need to cut things out? So that's your first set of practices. The second set of practices tries to lock in those changes that you made after that first set of practices and really get the content where you want it to be. And then the third set of practices, you want to concentrate on your delivery. Maybe you want to record yourself and watch it back and see what you can do better in terms of your delivery. But all those things that make for good delivery, looking up more than looking down, naturally using gestures, having a pleasant facial expression, having your facial expression match whatever it is that you're talking about. So those are some things that make for good delivery, and practicing in a setting like the one where you'll be speaking is a good thing to do. And even if you can get a look at the room ahead of time, if you're doing it in person, and even students sometimes even go to empty classrooms and practice their classroom presentations that way. All right, so, but there's things going on with your body and your mind. So I'm going to talk about the body first. And people always say, well, what do I do about my nerves? Well, nervousness is normal. If you're not nervous, you're abnormal. If you are nervous, you are normal. So there's some things you can do to help alleviate not all of the nerves, but just have something to do with all that extra energy that's flowing through you physically because of this adrenaline that's happening as you know that you have to speak. So before you have to speak, you can just do some really light, moderate exercise. You can take a brisk walk around the building, not enough to get yourself panting or anything, but just something to physically take that edge off. You can use relaxation techniques like deep breathing and breathing in to a count of 1, 2, 3, holding it, and then breathing out to a count of 1, 2, 3. You can do that even as you're sitting, waiting for your turn, if there's more than one presentation that day in class or something like that. You can use that nervous energy to add to what you're saying, kind of harness it and add more facial expressions, add more just force to your voice, but even just the way you modulate your voice and make it more interesting. You can use that extra energy for that. Wear clothes that you feel confident in, and that is going to help you be more confident, is when you have those clothes that you feel like you look really good in. And then you want to practice ahead of time, and that practice, like we talked about just a few seconds ago, will help you develop a muscle memory for presenting. So this muscle memory, this idea that you can just go back to what you had practiced and you're not really thinking about it as hard. And then find those friendly faces in the audience. The picture here on this slide is me doing my TED Talk at Tedx Savannah, and my family was in the audience. The other people involved in Tedx Savannah, the other speakers were in the audience. And even though I couldn't see the audience all that well, it was nice to know they were there. And you find those friendly faces while you're speaking. That'll help ease what's going on as you get ready to speak and as you're speaking. But what I really like to focus on is positive messages that you can say to yourself that will help you be a more confident speaker. And so here's the way it works, and this is in my TED Talk, is that so we perceive what we expect to perceive. So you're giving a presentation and you see somebody yawning and you're thinking, oh gosh, I'm so boring. Or you see somebody falling asleep, or you see somebody fiddling with their phones. And the thing about it is that those things feed into negative messages that we tell ourselves. So we tell ourselves, oh, I'm so boring. Nobody wants to hear what I have to say. And the fact is that's not true. There could be lots of other things going on. The person who's yawning, maybe they had to pull an all-nighter, maybe they worked all night. The person who's fiddling with their phones, maybe they were waiting for something really important that was going on that has nothing to do with you as a speaker. So because we perceive what we expect to perceive, these positive messages, they're also called inoculation messages, can help inoculate us against the negative messages and the negative perceptions that we can have while we're speaking. So here are some examples of some positive messages. My nervousness is normal, and it is. So when you feel nervous, whatever that is for you, whether it's butterflies in your stomach, whether it's your hand shaking, whether it's just feeling like you can't all the way catch your breath, and whatever it is, remind yourself, hey, this is normal. So I'm feeling what I normally feel when I have to do public speaking. And then also reminding yourself, the audience wants to hear what I have to say. Even if it's a classroom presentation, guess what? Your instructor wants to hear what you have to say. The other students want to hear what you have to say, because it's going to add to their understanding of whatever that topic is. And you're the expert in that moment on that topic because you've prepared that presentation. I tell my students, your presentation is a gift to the audience. And so allow them to take that gift and use it. And then also, I know what I'm talking about. If you're prepared, you do know what you're talking about. Remind yourself of that. You know, and you probably know better than anybody else in your audience what it is that you have to say. And then, just a quick one is, I've got this, okay? So, and this is from, my TED Talk, and you can look it up if you want to, if you just go to tedxsavannah.com Past events 2018, designing a response to fear of public speaking. And that's all I have for you all today. And so we're going to go through some questions now, and I think Delaney's going to ask them. But if you have any other questions, just throw them in the chat there.
Hi, yeah, so thank you again for being here. I've also been waiting to do this since fall, so I'm very, very excited that we finally, got it. So we're going to just move right on into our pre-submitted questions. So the first one is, how do you prepare for a presentation, and what are your suggestions for a successful presentation? I know you kind of went into that, but.
Right. So I told Delaney, go ahead and ask me those questions. So I tried to cover about the first 4 questions in what I just told you all. But how I personally prepare is that exact way. So I find out what I can about the audience and the occasion, and then I figure out what it is that I want to say, and then I organize it, and I do those practices. Those practices are essential, and figuring out and really nailing down that content and making sure it's fitting the time frame that I've been asked to speak, and then focusing also on my delivery. But that's the way that I prepare. Now, TEDx is a little bit different. You have to use memorized delivery, at least in our Savannah location you do, and I am not a good memorizer. I can talk to you all day with a set of notes in front of my hand, with a set of notes in front of me or in my hands. I can talk all day with notes. But it's a different kind of speaking when you have to memorize. And, maybe in your department, I did some training in our biochem and chemistry departments here. And I was told after I did the training, yeah, that's normal in their department for students or when you go to academic conferences to have to present with memorized delivery. So I would say if you are challenged, as I am, with memorized delivery, then you have to know it like extra well. But the good news is you put the time in, you know it well, you kind of like live with it and practice it enough so it doesn't sound like you're reciting like the Pledge of Allegiance, and then you can still do it. And it's proof that I could do it because I did it on the TEDx stage, and I never thought that I would. And my TED talk was 8 minutes long, so I talked for 8 minutes with no notes, so it was a little scary.
I can see how that would be scary. I am not a memorizer either. But the next question is, what do you believe is more important, the content or the delivery?
Okay, that's not a trick question, but my answer, you may think like that's a cop-out, but I feel like they're equally important. But there's more to my answer than that. Because they're going to influence each other. So you can have the best content in the world, but if you don't deliver it well, let's say you deliver it in monotone, let's say you deliver it staring down at your notes, like you don't engage with the audience at all with your delivery, or you fill it with vocalized pauses like then you're going to be less credible to the audience, and they're going to be less likely to accept your message. So both of them are important, but there's a really funny TED talk out there. It's by Will Stevens. It was with a TEDx event in New York City, I think. And it's he does all the right things for delivery, but there's absolutely no content at all. And it is hilarious. And I show it to students as often as I can. And that really proves the point that you can have the best delivery in the world, but if the content is missing, it's just, in this case, it was very entertaining, but it wasn't a gift to the audience other than keeping us entertained for about 10 minutes. So yeah, so they're both equally important for different reasons because they're going to play off of one another in terms of a successful presentation.
Yes, okay. And then this next question asks for any suggestions you might have for keeping an audience's attention.
Oh, this one is difficult, but I think that the very first few minutes of your presentation are key. So how can you draw the audience in? How can you make them want to hear more about what you have to say? And so there's a lot of different ways to do this. A great way, though, is storytelling. So my TED Talk starts out with a story where I talk about my dog getting attacked. And so now you really want to go watch it, right? Find out what happened to my dog. She's fine. Okay. So drawing the audience in right from the beginning, if you can capture the attention, then we say in public speaking, we tell them what we're going to tell them, then we tell them what we told them. And that is giving the audience a roadmap through your presentation. So there's this idea that you're moving through it. There's nothing worse than that feeling that you don't know when the speaker is going to stop speaking. Okay, it's excruciating, isn't it? You're like, oh, come on. And they say something like, and And so now at the end of my first point, you're like, oh my goodness, that was just the first point, like how many points do you have? So giving the audience an idea, like previewing it after you've drawn them in, made them want to hear more, previewing where you're going with it, then telling them what you're going to tell them in an organized way, a way that gives them an idea that you're moving through your speech, adding in transitions. So we've talked about this, so now let's talk about this. And so giving them a little bit of a roadmap to follow as they're listening. And then at the end, telling them what you told them, just a little bit of a reminder, and then leaving them with a memorable thought or idea. And so storytelling is important because we capture the emotions of the speaker when we tell a story, and it's very engaging. So beyond just the information that you're sharing, if you're doing a presentation, what are some ways in which you can make that information more real by telling a story or providing an example? And so it's not just this big chunk of information that you're kind of laying out there for the audience. So those are just some simple ways for engagement. And I think that just even your own kind of desire to be there, it adds to your engagement. So I'm really glad I'm here today. And so I hope that's coming across. I think that it probably is, even though we're talking virtually. And but a lot of times we get up and we do a presentation, we really don't want to be there. If it's, it's for a grade, maybe, 20% of our grade is at stake, or it's with a group that it's a group presentation and we're not really all that happy about the group that we got stuck with, that's going to come through. So using those thoughts in your head and those inoculation messages and those ideas to say to yourself is going to help you be more engaging with the audience as well.
Yeah, when I watched your TED Talk last week, I suppose, the story with the dog had me on the edge of my seat in the first minute. So that definitely works, everyone. But
I do have to give a caveat about that, which is the first time I wrote that TED Talk and gave it to some students before I applied to Tedx Savannah. Even though I'm a speaker coach, I still had to apply to be a speaker. But the first time I did the speech was all about the dog attack. The speech was like my TED Talk was one whole long story. And then the longer I sat with it, I realized that it wasn't really about that was what it wasn't. That's not what it was about. So I made the story very short at the beginning. And I think I ended up with a much better talk. But that's the other thing, is that sometimes you got to live with your presentation for a little while, sleep on it, look at it again with fresh eyes and kind of see, oh, you know what, that's not really coming across the way that I thought it was going to. So here's one thing that I mentioned to students at the beginning of the semester. It's in my syllabus. For every minute that you're going to be speaking, you need to plan for an hour of preparation. And you're like, what? You mean if I have to do a 5-minute classroom presentation, I got to plan for 5 hours? Yep. And you better not plan for all those 5 hours to be the night before or the morning of, right? So that's another thing, giving yourself enough time, and really for a thing like a TED Talk, that's pretty high stakes. The planning started months ahead of time, not weeks or days ahead of time.
Yes, I think that is something that I agree with, because presentations are not something you want to leave for the day before. But another question, just in general, what is your top tip for dealing with stage fright?
Okay, the top tip is whatever works for you. And I know that sounds like a cop-out too. For me, just the idea of being prepared, but tell you what, it's just like interviewing. The more you do it, the more comfortable and the more confident you feel. So really my top tip then would be, find as many opportunities as you can to speak in public and to give presentations. Maybe it's just doing the announcements at your club meeting. Maybe it's joining a Toastmasters organization. They have them all over the world. We have like 4 chapters here in Savannah. I know there are ones in Tallahassee as well. And they'll take you through their program. Yeah, it costs money, but if you want to be a better speaker, it's probably worth it for you. And so they take you through a program very similar to as if you were taking a public speaking class in college, and you practice public speaking and you help evaluate other speakers, and you're just given lots of opportunities to speak. And every week I think they do table topics where everybody has a chance to speak very briefly, but off the cuff, so to speak, or just in an impromptu type way. So find as many opportunities as you can. Amy Cuddy does this really great TED Talk. It's kind of old now, it's from 2012, but in it, she talks about a student who never talked in class. And you have to talk in class because it's part of your participation grade. And then the student, of course, you know, after like wanting to quit the graduate program, this very distinguished graduate program, actually does speak up in class, and she comes up with the best comment ever. And everybody's like, oh, wow, you know, I didn't even realize she was here, you know, but wasn't that the best comment ever? And so you can do it, and just convincing yourself you can do it. And even if it's just speaking up in class, finding as many opportunities as you can just to say things out loud. And it's about you and your message. It's about authenticity. That's what Amy Cuddy says. It's about bringing your real self to the speaking situation. And the more opportunities you give yourself to do that, the better you'll be. And my first big opportunity for that was as an orientation leader. So kudos out there to the orientation program at Florida State University, Mary Coburn. She was director of orientation, and then she went on to be VP of student affairs. But even having a summer job where I was an orientation leader, it gave me many opportunities to speak in front of a group and to work on leadership skills. And so as many opportunities as you have, take advantage of them. You're not going to be perfect every single time, but the thing about it is you're going to learn from every opportunity, and it's going to be that the nerves are never going to go away, but you're going to be more used to what happens to you when you know you have to speak, and you'll be able to handle them better.
Actually, a perfect segue talking about imperfections. The next question that we have is, how do you recover if you draw a blank or you lose your spot while you're speaking?
Well, here's the thing. When you're speaking, so I tell students this all the time too, that you always feel more nervous than you look to the audience. So my students did very simple self-intro speeches yesterday in my afternoon class. And one student was convinced that we could see her hand shaking as she held her notes in her hand. And she sits down, she goes like, didn't you see my hand shaking? And the person sitting next to her said, no, what do you mean? Your hand was shaking? And I'm like, I didn't see your hand shaking. So that's to remind yourself, you always look more nervous. You always feel more nervous than you look to the audience, right? Okay, but here's the other thing. When we stop speaking for a second or two or even three, it feels like eternity to us. So we lose our place. We forgot what we're going to say next. And I know, I watched my recording of my TED Talk, and I can tell you where those moments happened. There's one very near the end where I looked down at the timer, and the timer is getting very close to 8 minutes. And I know my talk is 8 minutes, 30 seconds. Well, here's a little secret. I left something out, okay? But I didn't have time to figure out where it was that I left it out. But at that moment, when I'm looking at the timer, I'm realizing I left something out. And if you go back and even earlier, I can tell you exactly where it is because I stopped speaking for a minute. So here's the advice. If you stumble, if you fall, if you lose your place, be quiet just for a second. There you go. I was quiet for 2.5 seconds right there. And it may seem like an eternity to you, but it didn't feel like an eternity to the audience. You were like, oh, that was a nice break. You don't even realize sometimes, because we're so used to stuff coming at us so fast, that every once in a while it's nice to have a little tiny bit of silence. And then don't beat yourself up for it. If you leave something out, it's okay. if you get emotional, it's okay. It's when you're telling a personal story maybe, and so you start to tear up or you start to choke up. And this has happened to me, and I teach it to my students every semester when we do talk about speaking at special occasions. That's okay. Just stop for a minute, get yourself back together. And the audience is not going to think any less of you. They're actually going to really appreciate your honesty and your authenticity, and just they're along there with you, cheering for you, and they're feeling that emotion along with you, whatever it is. And so I don't know. It doesn't seem as helpful when I'm standing here saying it, or sitting here saying it, but it is being okay with your mistakes and just being quiet when you need to get yourself back together. And the audience will understand, and they're there with you. Oh, I just remembered kind of a funny thing though. The last semester, yes, I had a really busy schedule last semester, and I taught from 12:15 to 12:30 to 6:15 without a break. I got to my last class of the day and I always give them sample speeches, and I went to go start the sample speech and I totally lost it. It was so funny. It was funny to me because I'm like, this is so unlike me, right? I can't tell you how many times I've given this speech to a class and I just completely bombed. So I just started laughing like I just did right then. And I just stopped and I said, hey, you know what, y'all, it's been a long day. I'm going to start that over again. And, they understood and they thought, well, it's okay. My instructor can mess up. Then it's not going to be the end of the world if I mess up too. So.
Yes, I think we've all had those moments where just the brain is not working. But so this submission says, I'm very good at presenting when I prepare a speech and practice a lot. However, if I want to speak off script or give an impromptu speech, I can't seem to keep myself from using filler words like like, etc. Do you have any advice?
Yeah, so filler words. Whew, okay. As soon as I mentioned them in class, then I start noticing how much I use them. And I know I've had like 5 or 6 at least already this session we were having today. You need to be, again, it's just being comfortable with silence. It's just recognizing when you're doing it. So good for you, the person who asked the question, you use filler words. And the thing about it is filler words oftentimes we're not comfortable with silence. So we feel like we have to fill it with an or an ah, but also we're not sure what's coming next. So being really comfortable with transitions is going to help in a prepared speech for those filler words not to be there. And so maybe you want to record yourself while you're practicing and seeing how those filler words are coming in. Are they coming in when you're transitioning from one idea to another? And while you're just, kind of getting your brain caught up to where you need to be in your presentation. But if it's impromptu, if you've been asked at the beginning of a meeting at work, hey, can you tell us the status of your project? And then you're like, okay, what do I do? I'm not, you haven't prepared to tell everybody the status of your project. The key for impromptu is to do the same thing you do for a prepared speech, but just do it very, very quickly. Find a way to introduce your topic to the audience. Well, I'm glad so-and-so you asked me to speak about that project because I've been working really hard on it. Okay, that's your opening, right? Then 2 or 3 things at the most that you want to say about the project. Well, this week we've been working on this, and next week we're looking forward to doing blah, 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 blah. And then we hope to complete by this date. So there you go. That's the status of the project. And I know I'll be reaching out to a few of you in the future for some help, and I'll look forward to working with you. Okay, so the thing about it is with impromptu, when we're not prepared, we don't know when to stop. Okay, and if you listen to a speaker rambling on and it's repeating themselves and not knowing when to stop or when to sit down, that can be excruciating also. So so when you go off script or when you're asked to speak with little or no preparation, very quickly in your mind, just do those 3 things. Figure out a way to start, figure out a couple things to say, 2 or 3, and then figure out a way to stop or end, or what you want, how you want to end. Do you want to, are you asking for volunteers? What does the audience need to do next based on what you've said? And then, sit down and you're done. I think people appreciate brevity rather than, and when you're not prepared, people are not expecting you to pull facts and figures out off the top of your head and, pithy quotes and things like that. So be in line with the audience's expectations of what's expected when you're speaking, without notes or without preparation, and just organize it the best you can in that very, very, very condensed way.
Okay, all right. This is another kind of personal submission that says, with the last 2 years consisting of a lot of virtual learning and the chance that I might have to present to my class virtually, what would be your tips, if any, for a successful virtual presentation?
Oh, that's good, because you know what? Employers are doing interviews virtually nowadays too. And so it used to be you had the phone interview first, the screening phone interview before they brought you in person. But now especially as jobs are going remote, especially in COVID times, they're doing the screening interview and or the final interview on Zoom. So yeah, okay. So here are a few things. And the first one is that you want to have your frame in a good place. Okay, so right now my picture is framed so you can see me from here up, just below my shoulders up. Okay, my face is not filling the entire screen like this. That's a little too close, but I'm not so far away that you have to like squint to see me, right? So you want to be about 12 to 18 inches away from your camera. That camera needs to have where that camera is makes a big difference. Okay, so if you're using a laptop, you might need to raise that laptop up. That camera needs to be at about eye level for you, and that's going to make you look the most natural to the people that you're talking to. In terms of volume, you want to be in a quiet space. We did some interviews, some virtual interviews before classes started in the fall, and through just sets of circumstances, one of the people that we interviewed was in a coffee shop, and that's fine. That's where she had to be to do the interview, but it was quite loud and she didn't have a headset on. So we could hear a lot of that noise happening, going on behind her, and her voice wasn't as clear as it could be. So what are all of the ways in which you can make this virtual experience the best that it can be? My door is closed. There's nobody else in my hallway today. If there was, I probably would have put the headset on and used the headset. So, camera at eye level, about 12 to 18 inches away from the camera. And I'm sitting in a chair that swivels, but I'm resisting the urge to swivel. Okay, look how distracting that is. Okay, so we do things, and I just said okay like about 3 different times there. We do things when we get nervous, and so be aware of what those are. If you want, the Career Center at the campus where I am does mock interviews. Do those mock interviews, so then you can catch yourself doing things like this. And the person who's doing the mock interview with you says, you know what, if you're going to be tempted to do that, you might want to use a chair that doesn't swivel so that you're able to stay in a way that's not distracting. I tell students when they present that if they're going to be tempted to play with anything that they're wearing, or even like put their hands through their hair or whatever, then you want to do whatever you can to limit those types of distractions as well. But they're particularly bad on Zoom, okay? They're particularly bad in the virtual setting because we don't have anything else to look at. We're just looking at this picture. And that's one of the reasons why Zoom is so fatiguing as well, and why we get so tired of it, because of this in a regular classroom, we would be moving around more. And even as an instructor, I'd be staying in the front of the room perhaps, but even moving around more than I am stuck in a chair at this 12 to 18 inches away from my camera. Also, my lighting's not that bad in here. I was speaking with a student today virtually. She was in her dorm room and her lighting was really bad, but it wasn't a presentation. She was just meeting with me for office hours. Hold on. Excuse me. And this is what happens after I speak for a long time. I start coughing, I start having, but that's why I have some water right here. All right, so that means I'm talking too much. We need to ask more questions. But her lighting was not that great. And if she were giving a presentation, that would be a recommendation that I would have for her. I've seen students present from sofas. I've seen them present from bedrooms and sitting on their bed. No. If this is a presentation that you're getting a grade on, or that you're being evaluated in any way, if it's for work, if it's for a job, okay, find a desk, find a quiet area. There's probably someplace on campus, rooms in the library. We have a learning commons where you can reserve a room. You're the only one in that room at that time. And so whatever you need to do, you want to eliminate as many distractions as you can, and then make it look the best that you can. And then it's a matter of just understanding that the person you're talking to is through that camera, and as much as you can. With this amount of sustained eye contact would be uncomfortable if we were face to face, but we're not face to face. So I'm looking right at the camera right now, and that's what you want to do, especially in an interview situation. You're looking at that camera, you're pretending like that camera is that other person. And there was a speaker once, she is in Toastmasters, and she was like the first runner-up in the national competition. The first year that they had to do it virtually, the international speaker competition that they have for Toastmasters. And she said, she spoke to one of my classes, she said she put like little googly eyes on her camera, and that reminded her where to look. And she actually looked just past that camera, but those googly eyes were just reminding her that that was really where she needed to be speaking to. That's where her audience was. So those are some things that I would do on Zoom.
Okay, yes, those are all excellent tips because I have given a couple presentations on Zoom and they are totally different than in person. Going into our next question, it says, I know that failure is inevitable at some point with public speaking and presenting. Do you have an example of any time that you had to present or speak and it wasn't super successful? And how did you bounce back?
Okay, so I already told you about the time last semester in my class where I just totally crashed and burned as I was tried to begin a speech. But for me, that's a pretty low stakes situation. The class is going to have me all semester long. They're going to know that's not how I usually am. But let's say it's a higher stakes situation. And I was trying to think of a higher stakes situation where I crashed and burned. But there were other situations where I wasn't as prepared as I thought I was going to be. Let's say I was speaking to my church, okay, and I ran out of time to prepare, which it happens, and it wasn't as effective as I thought it could be. You kind of brush yourself off and pick yourself up and do it again and again. We oftentimes are more critical of ourselves than other people are. And you have to remember that when you're up there speaking, let's say it's for a club or a church group or anything, even like now that y'all are in college, like going back and speaking to a high school class or an elementary school class or something like that, like those people, they probably wouldn't want to be in your shoes. In other words, there are people out there that would never get up in front of a group to speak. And just the fact that you're up there speaking in front of a group, you have their admiration and their attention. And so give yourself a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, realize that you did it, and that even if you messed up or didn't do it the way that you wanted to, that you'll have another chance, another opportunity, and you can use it as a learning, what went wrong. Okay. And again, I'm trying to think of a very specific example that was more high stakes than my messing up in front of class. So TEDx, we have 3 rehearsals, 3 big rehearsals. And the second rehearsal, I still was not done memorizing, and which was okay. But between the first rehearsal and the second rehearsal, my TED Talk got a lot better too. I think you have to be comfortable with feedback. And so in terms of if you want to get better at anything. And so for my TEDx talk, I was a speaker coach already when I applied to be a speaker, and just being open to the feedback of the other people that were on the team, the team that did the selection, the board members, volunteers who were selecting the speakers. They came back with some very specific questions to me that made me change the content of my talk. And I wouldn't say it was a crash and burn, but I wasn't where I wanted to be. And so for me, it was not as successful as it could have been, but just kind of being open to the feedback, and then understanding that it's a process, and that we're all in the process of being who we want to be and becoming who we want to be. And so recovering from an instance where you felt like, oh, I really bombed that presentation. Oh, I really should have prepared for that more. Or, oh, I really didn't understand what I was being asked to present on, and all these other presentations are better than mine. Just kind of giving yourself just a little bit of grace in those situations, saying, well, I did the best that I could for now, and next time I'll do better. And again, it just sounds simple, but we don't allow ourselves enough grace when we do make mistakes. And I know there's like a tendency there's a tendency in college to, you worked so hard to get into college, right? Doing all those things in high school so that you get accepted at FSU, and that you'd be have the scholarships that you have, and now you're in the honors and scholars program, and there's so much pressure. And then I think we get in college, and there's still that pressure, like everything we're doing is going to make a difference into the job that we have when we graduate. And just kind of, giving a little bit of a relief valve off that pressure, and saying, sometimes I joke and say, well, what's the worst thing that can happen? And so sometimes when I volunteered to do something, I think, well, what's the worst thing that could happen? Well, they could never ask me to do it again, right? Okay, so I know that doesn't work in classes, but certainly if you volunteered to do the announcements or whatever, and you feel like you really bombed it, or a joke didn't go over, or your attempt at humor didn't go over well, just imagine what was the worst thing that could happen. They could, never ask me to do this again. But it's usually you did fine, and you just kind of give yourself some grace I don't know. I feel like I didn't really answer the question, but I tried. Okay.
It was answered, I think. And then as a speaker coach for Tedx Savannah, what are some of your key coaching points for those speakers specifically?
Oh yeah. So fingers crossed we'll be back to in-person events soon. My parents asked me, hey, what's going on with Tedx Savannah? And I have not heard. The last time I checked with them, they're like, we're going to be back as soon as in-person events come back. So the thing about TEDx is that it's not just the speakers on the stage and the recording that lives on forever, thanks to the internet, but it's really the interactions of the people at the event. And so there's a lot of time. It's the synergy that goes on between the people that have all been gathered in one room as representative of our community and things that we care about. So until that can happen again, we're just waiting. But I've coached students and others as part of the event, and I'm hoping we can be back in person too soon. And when we do get back in person, here's what I tell students or anybody who says, I want to give a speech on the TEDx stage. I say you need to have a clear message. So the TED organization, their tagline is ideas worth spreading. You need to have one singular idea that is a new idea or that is a different way of seeing something that is either from your own personal experience or something that you've researched or something that's new or different. It can't be the same old. It needs to go along with the theme. It has to have some connection to the theme of the event. So the year that I spoke, our theme was Legacy by Design. And in 2020, when we got shut down, I was trying to think of what the theme was. Standard deviation, that was the theme. So it has your single idea has to connect to the theme and somehow, and then and then from there, if you get selected, then there's lots of things we can do to coach you along. But the key is making your idea clear enough. And we have a pitch for our finalists. And in that pitch session, we tell them, give us a mini version of what you're going to say, draw us in, make us want to hear more. And it's really have you encapsulated that idea, that single idea that you feel like it's an idea worth spreading. And so it's got to be authentic. It's got to be from you, from your own experience. Nobody can tell the story that you have, but to be able to do it on a TED stage, you do have to be up there at that next level, and we can help you get there. Your coaches can help you get there. And it's certainly been really fun for me to participate in that and to see that go on. So, yeah.
I'm jumping in for Delaney.
Yeah.
I love that. We have a TEDx FSU here. I have yet to go because the first year that I got here, I was busy and then it's been COVID. So here we are. We're doing good on time. And we had another question that was submitted this morning. And then I've gotten one live question in the chat to myself. So those might be two good questions to wrap up with. But the next question is how do you feel more confident with a foreign accent? What are your tips on if you have an accent and how to be confident with that accent?
Sure. And this is where I have to kind of take my hat off to anybody who attempts to speak in a language that is not their first language. And I have students in my classes who English is not their first language. And I'm in awe of you, first of all. Okay. But oftentimes I do meet people out and about, and they'll say, oh, I need help with my public speaking. I don't speak so well. My English is not so great. And I would just say that it's about the message, and that we look beyond the accent if the message is there. And so practice is always going, and preparation is always going to be key, just like it would if you were speaking in your native language. But really it is just kind of taking a moment and seeing yourself from a perspective of the audience. And people who have accents, even I have had a few students with very thick Southern accents, okay? And so just there are things that you can do to make yourself clear in terms of articulation, but just confidence, practice, and then using opportunities to speak. as many as you can, I think will help you. It helps everyone, but it particularly helps someone who, if English is not their first language and they need to present in English. Again, hats off to whoever asked that question. That is it. Really, you are doing something amazing, and most people realize it when they see you and when they hear you, that you are doing just really great. And the thing about it is, like now, with virtual presentations on PowerPoint 365, you can add captions. They go in there automatically, and so that is helpful. It's helpful for people who are listening to you if English is not their first language and you're speaking in English, but it's helpful also for a speaker of another language to have that that if it's not quite as clear, to have that captioning go along with your presentation right there. Yeah.
Man, it's been a couple months since we did this. I needed to turn on the captions, and now here we are at the end. I didn't turn on the caption. So thank you for that reminder. But that is also really great too, if you're trying to transcribe anything from the session as well. But great point. So somebody had submitted a private question in the chat and had said, you know, you've been given a lot of good advice on like kind of overcoming and preparing for that fear. But what do you do if you're one of those people where physically people can just see the fear, what, like sweating, red in the face? Like, how do you overcome that mentally, knowing that you're probably going to be visibly nervous? What can they do?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, when I am very, very nervous, my upper lip trembles. Okay, I have to be really nervous for my upper lip to tremble. But it does. I've had students that flush, kind of get red from their chest, kind of, and it creeps up into their face. Certainly, we all have experienced the sweating that is just like soaking through our shirts, right? And so we recognize, first of all, I know I've said it already, that it feels worse to you than it looks to the audience. Okay, sure. If there's something that is visible to the audience, it is visible to them on such a smaller scale than it feels like to you. And you know, just recognizing that that it happens, just kind of saying, that's what happens when I speak. And you know, it's about kind of changing your mindset about it. It shows that you're invested in what you're talking about. And I think that that, you know, doing some of those other things that we talked about early on to help your whatever physical reaction that you have, helping with that extra amount of energy that you have when you get up to speak. So the between the mindset and the physical things that you can do, there's not a whole lot more that you could do beyond that. And so practicing getting used to the feeling. And then, you know, when you're used to it, then it doesn't seem so bad. Whereas if you go a really long time between speaking and then you sit down, you're like, oh gosh, I was sweating, and I'm sure they could see that sweat, and oh, I had to use a handkerchief or whatever, or oh, look at my shirt, it soaked through. Then when you only present like once a semester and all that happens, and it feels a lot worse than, oh, I did that again, oh, it wasn't so bad that time, and so I think that'll go a long way. And then, you know, in all of the classes that I've taught, all of the students who've given speeches, nobody's ever thrown up and nobody's ever fainted. So that's not going to happen to you. So whatever the worst thing that you can think about in terms of physically, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I mean, that's good to know. I'm a staff member, but I'm also getting my doctorate. And so maybe I'll call you in about a year and a half when I need to defend my dissertation, just as that reminder. But I'm so thankful for all of your answers today and for all of the pre-submitted questions. I'm so glad we did that so that you were able to get those questions. I did want to tell all the participants that if you have any follow-up questions that you just didn't feel comfortable asking, or you think about it later, I will be sending you all an email with Karla's email address in there. So she has graciously given us her email address. So if you want to follow up with her as a resource and ask her a question, you will be able to do that. But Karla, thank you so much for your time, your expertise. Is there anything that you want to say to close with before I wrap us up, or?
Well, just go out there and do it, and you can do it. And, you know, it's going to be okay, and you're going to be great. And yeah, keep taking advantage of all those opportunities. And thank you for the opportunity to connect with students today. This has been awesome.
Yeah, it's been great. And you all can catch this video if you want to go back and see any answers that you want to relive or hear again. I will be sending you all the video as well, and it will be on our Friends of HSF YouTube channel starting tomorrow. So thank you all for joining us, and we hope you come to another event in the future. Thank you, Karla.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you.